Angelina Jolie, Part 2. Angelina Jolie Voigt was born on the 4th of June 1975 at Cedars-Sinai Hospital in Los Angeles, California, to actors Jon Voight and Marceline Bertrand. Two parents who are actors. Therefore, prominent narcissistic traits would be associated with them that may well be passed on to her. There's also worthwhile examination of her father, which will come in due course. She was born in 1975, and her parents separated in 1976. Immediately, that presents us with a potential lack of control environment as a consequence of her parents splitting up. She and her brother lived with their mother, who had abandoned her acting ambitions to focus on raising her children. This may well demonstrate the presence of emotional empathy from their mother, shielding them from particular behaviours, which I shall examine in due course, and the fact that she was willing to give up her own acting ambitions to bring up her children is certainly demonstrative, at first blush at least, of emotional empathy. Jolie's mother raised her as a Catholic, but did not require her to go to church. As a child, she often watched films with her mother, and it was actually this, rather than her father's successful career, that inspired her interest in acting, although she did have a bit part in Voight's Looking to Get Out, age 7. When Jolie was 6 years old, Bertrand and her live-in partner, filmmaker Bill Day, moved the family to Palisade, New York. Again, this could be potentially a lack of control situation of being moved, and they then returned to Los Angeles 5 years later. It was at this juncture that Jolie decided that she wanted to act, and enrolled at the Lee Strasberg Theatre Institute, where she trained for 2 years. At this juncture, many of her classmates undertook modelling work, and in an attempt to make some extra cash, Jolie tried to get in on the act, despite thinking that she looked like a Muppet. Now, interestingly, you can see from the various photographs that to describe herself as a Muppet is entirely inaccurate. We know now that she is objectively a beautiful woman, and was clearly both a beautiful young woman and an attractive child. Therefore, to suggest that she could not undertake some modelling because she looked like a Muppet introduces a potential insecurity on her part. Possibly, of course, at the age that she was, she had yet to find herself. Or was this a form whereby she would engage in having a view of herself that she has said later on to elicit sympathy, perhaps, to suggest, oh, I couldn't do the modelling very well because I thought I looked like a Muppet. Initially, Jolie failed miserably in the competitive profession and was told by agents that she was too short, too scarred, too fat, too everything. She faced repeated knockbacks. The scars that the agents used as an excuse not to hire her were from her self-harming, something that Jolie began at the age of 14 in an attempt to break free from her teenage frustrations. The issue of self-harm is one that can have a range of causes. Self-harm is when somebody intentionally damages or injures their body, and some of the reasons can be expressing or coping with emotional distress, a way of punishing themselves, relieving unbearable tension, a response to intrusive thoughts, perhaps those associated with obsessive-compulsive disorder. It might be a cry for help, and it can also be a way of trying to feel in control. Some narcissists engage in self-harm as a consequence of attention-seeking behaviour. Therefore, they triangulate people with their injuries, and they engage in it as a purpose of trying to feel in control. but there are many other reasons why people engage in self-harm that are not associated with being a narcissist. The emotional distress could come from, for instance, being bullied, being placed under pressure at school or work, money worries, low self-esteem, struggling with stress or anxiety or depression, being a victim of physical or sexual abuse, experiencing difficulties with regard to mental health overall. So self-harming is a potential facet of narcissistic behaviour, but it also must be kept in mind that there are a variety of other reasons which are nothing to do with narcissism, and it's important to keep that factor at the front of one's mind. Jolie admitted that around 13 and 14 it was a bad time for her, and she stated that she didn't want to be around anymore, which suggests suicidal ideation. She explained that she felt trapped and that was cutting herself because it felt like she was releasing something. Again, might that be a response to the suggestion that feeling trapped is a threat to control? Or was this being trapped as a consequence of the situation she found herself in vis-à-vis her family and was not being interpreted as a threat to control? Jolie has had a preoccupation with the concept of needing to feel, and that she has admitted that as far back as childhood, she only liked to be touched in a certain way. Many narcissists reject touch because it hints at intimacy, which is a form of shackle upon a narcissist. If you watch my video, Why the Narcissist Rejects Intimacy, and the misery of attachment, you'll understand more in that regard. Jolie once explained, "I don't like it when I'm lightly touched. You see, I like it when I'm grasped and held tightly, if someone strives not to let me go, and if I'm not touched in a proper way. I hate such touching. It's like the handshake. I don't like a light one. If you want to shake my hand, shake properly." This dislike of being touched and touched lightly may well be indicative of the fact that when you touch someone lightly, that's more linked to showing concern, compassion, intimacy for them, whereas being grasped firmly, being gripped, is a different kind of response. And it might be that potential narcissism is rejecting this form of intimacy and manifesting in not liking being touched. Jolie knew what she wanted in terms of physical contact with her first boyfriend. It's also been recorded that she was very good at manipulating her parents, who at this juncture were competing with each other to be the main influence in her life. When the family moved back to Los Angeles, this meant that Voight got to see his children on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and every weekend. Voight admitted in an interview in 1987 that even at the age of 12, Jolie knew how to wrap him around her little finger. He explained that she would turn 45 minutes worth of homework into maybe an hour and a half because of reminiscences and teasing, and she'll make a game of it. He explained that she had become a bit of a pest to her brother, Jamie. He also, in 1987, described her as quite striking, and perhaps a bit more like me, which may be unsettling to her, because she has a quick wit. She's very imaginative and very active. She must be doing something continually, and I delight in her. It's interesting to note that her father talks about the necessity of doing something continually, as that points to perhaps the fact that she becomes bored very easily, and that she needs to be stimulated. It was the case that, as a teenager, Jolie didn't get on particularly well with her pupils at Beverly Hills High, and also she had difficulties with the various teachers to the extent that they ended up enlisting the help of a psychotherapist. Jolie explained that they enrolled anybody whose parents were divorced, and basically that the psychotherapist seemed to have formed the view that she would be unable to adapt to life. Jolie recalled that she was assuring the psychotherapist that she had adapted, but she didn't seem to accept this, and this caused Jolie to remark that she doesn't believe in psychotherapy. This is an interesting remark because it shows a clash and might be demonstrative of her experiencing a threat to control. The fact is that psychotherapy and an attempt to understand her better may well have been viewed by her as intrusive and a threat to control, and thus she rejected it. In the sessions, the teachers, remarking upon them, explained that she was unrestrained, and also, interestingly, that she was inclined to antisocial psychopathy. Jolie shrugged off this label. She said, "Since childhood, I was called a sociopath." That is a very interesting piece of information. Now, that may not have been a formal diagnosis, but the admission that she gives there tells us two things. First, that she was engaging in behaviour which people saw as according with that of a sociopath. And furthermore, she simply didn't care that people labelled her as such. She admitted that people called her that. She didn't seek to hide it. She almost wore it on her sleeve. She wasn't popular with the other girls in her year, and in fact, she developed a reputation as being a man-eater. When she was 14, at Beverly Hills High School, she was stealing boys who were 17, and once they were panting after her, she'd walk away. It was all about the chase. Interestingly again, that these recollections about her behaviour as a teenager are demonstrative of an individual that enjoyed the thrill of the chase, that wanted to prey upon people, and indeed those that were older than her, seeking a reaction. Potentially, this might be fuel. And furthermore, the fact that she was able just to walk away from individuals might suggest game playing and an absence of emotional empathy. It was also explained that her behaviour was similar in relation to girls, that Angelina Jolie could seduce people into thinking that she was your best friend, seduction, love bombing, and then not speak to you again, black and white thinking. It was recorded that such cruelty was common by her, and she was devastatingly good about it. Already some interesting indicators forming in part 2, and as we look through her teens and her schooling and also her background with regard to money, which plays an important point, we will uncover more information to help us get a picture of what Angelina Jolie is. Join me in part 3.